What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode. Today we're continuing our nitrous install and this is part 4, and today we need to verify, test that all our wiring is done correctly and that all the inputs going to our controllers are reading what they're supposed to. So stick around and I'll show you just how to do that. Alright guys, so as you guys might have seen in part 3, we did the wiring for this car, and it was quite a bit of wiring, from wiring the solenoids, using different relays here, to converting a ground signal from our nitrous controller to a positive signal for our engine filter timing box, grabbing inputs for our RPM along with our throttle inputs. It's just quite a bit. We also wired in our safety ground switch. There's just quite a bit of stuff that we need to test and ensure that it is working. The main things we want to ensure is that our nitrous solenoids click on and off whenever the controller tells it to at wide open throttle. We also need to test this purge relay, make sure that that is getting the power when I'm pressing the button. And the best way to do all that is to test it with the vehicle turned off. Now you want to have the vehicle turned off so that obviously you can audibly hear the relays actually clicking. And that is one way to tell that you've wired everything properly. And I'll show you guys now what I mean when we go inside the car. Guys, I almost forgot. If you have a fuel pressure safety switch like I do here, and then you need to bypass it when testing the solenoids, because remember, the fuel pressure safety switch is actually wired to the ground of our relay, and so that is what helps us make sure that if we lose fuel pressure, that our relays do not keep spraying nitrous and no fuel. So we need to go ahead and bypass the fuel pressure when testing to make sure that the relays both click. And so let's do that before we test the car. Okay guys, so here inside we've got, of course, our arm switch and everything already wired up. We've got our little controller. Now what we want to do is put the car in accessory mode. So we do that by just holding onto the start button until it actually goes into accessory mode. And there we go. Now you see when we're in accessory mode, the radar turns on, and if this is on, then we should have power here. And one way to test it is to go ahead and flip the switch, and you can see the system is on, the controller is on. And so now here you'll see, when the first time you turn on a controller, what you're going to see is R and R, which means that the controller is ready on both stages. This side is number 1 and this is number 2, and of course it's for the 2 different stages. We're only using one of them. Now you can go ahead, if you hit the left button, that resets the timers if you have any kind of delays or things built in that you want to reset. And 2, when you hold down 2, that will bring down this, which is your RPM readout, and it actually uses all 3 of these. These first 2 digits are going to be like your tens, hundreds, and then your 1000 RPM is the 3rd digit. Of course the car is off, so right now you see the 000. So when we've got this ready, we still have to go in here and set up all of our parameters, or how we want this nitrous kit to work. Now to get into the programming mode, you're going to hold both of these buttons together at the same time until you see Pro pop up on the display. That's programming mode. We can let go, and now we get into the different settings. So first setting we can change here is the frequency that we want for the progressive, and this can be adjusted from, I believe, 10 to 30 or 40 hertz or megahertz, whatever the frequency is. It comes default at 15, and I believe Nitrous Outlet can recommend whether I need to get with them in contact and see if this needs to stay at 15 or go up to like 20, but 15 is probably just fine. You go to the next, whenever the number is flashing, you can use the second button to change it, and this one to move to the next part of the menu. Obviously we're going to leave it at 15. C is the RPM style setup, and this is very important because this is how the controller knows how to interpret the RPM signal. And by default this comes as 08, because you can actually wire it to where depending on where you get the input from for the RPM signal, whether the ECM or the way we have it individually at a coil. The instructions aren't very clear, but they tell you can go from 2 to 12 cylinders. Then you also have number 4 cylinders. We have it on 00 because we tapped into one individual coil, and that is what gives me the most accurate reading, and I'll show you guys that later down. But because of how I tapped into my individual coil, we want to keep this at 00. P is our reset delay, I believe, and we don't want this to memorize anything for the progressive delay. Basically, as soon as it loses the signal, we want to go ahead and have it reset back. And what that does is it allows it to, whenever you basically are out of your RPM window, when it comes back into the RPM window, it'll reset and do a smooth transition every single time it triggers. So we want to keep that at 0. And now we see channel 1 for a second, and number 1 is your starting RPM. Now I told you we wanted to test these relays to see that they're working properly. So the way you do that with the car off is you see that we're at 00. So we're going to make this start RPM window be 0. So we put it to 0, and we're going to put this to 0. So basically, as long as you're within at 0 RPM or higher, you're within the window to start spraying. And this is your end RPM window. I have it set to 17, which is 1700. So this goes by the hundreds and the thousands, and so I have it set at 1700, which is fine. We'll leave that at 1700. 3 is your delay time, and that is from the moment you get into an activation window, how long do you want to delay from the car starting to spray? And of course we don't want any delay, so as soon as it gets to that, all the parameters are met, we want it to start spraying. 4 is the start percentage for the nitrous solenoid. So how much do you want to start spraying at the very beginning? And I have it set to 50%, but that's not going to matter because we're going to be doing 00 for this next, which is 5, and that is the ramp time. And of course 00 means that there's 0 ramp time, so it's going to go to the end percentage instantly. So we're not going to do any type of progressive ramp. And 6 is the end percentage of your solenoids. 99% of course is basically 100. So this is going to be running at 100% instantly. Then we get to 7. 7 is the delay that you want on your control output, and this is the delay that we would want for the signal that tells the Lingenfelter timing box to go ahead and start pulling timing. Obviously we don't want any delay. As soon as it's spraying, we want it to start pull timing, so we have that set to 0. 8 is the throttle position sensor setting, and we've got it wired into our throttle pedals, so we need to set this to 02, and that of course is designated as TPS signal. And 9 actually is going to be where you set the voltage for your throttle position, and this is very important. What you want to do is you press down on the second button and you see it flashing, and now as you press down on the gas pedal, you'll see the voltage increase. And of course we want to go all the way to the end, to the very bottom, and you see 2.2. so that is with me all the way to the ground. And of course you don't have to hold it there, and it remembers it, and then it saves it. So you save it and then you're done. That is it. Channel 2, I have it activated at 99 and deactivated at 90,000, so it's never gonna actually trigger. And one thing I did for this one is on number 8, I set it to 01, which is a hot wide open throttle switch. So it'll only activate if it's all 12 volts on the input trigger, which of course is not wired, and that way this is always going to be R. Now as you can see, it's ready and it's good to go. So we've got the controller wired up to 0 RPM, so technically it should be it's within the RPM range, but it will not activate unless I go wide open throttle. And at the same time, we should hear something happen in the engine bay. What we want to see now is, first of all, as soon as I go wide open throttle, you'll see this should go to a 1, because remember we set our RPMs to 0. So let's find out. There you go. So you can even hear both relays clicking. Yeah, they're pretty loud. So that is pretty awesome, and you can see that even though we're within the window, as long as you're not fully pressing down on the throttle, it will not trigger the relays. So we do it again, and you'll see, and as soon as we let go, it stops the relays. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So now we know that is set. Now we know the relays are working. We know that they are triggering whenever we hit the gas pedal, and this shows that it is active. Now we can go and actually test our timing output. So we've got the relays working. Now we also want to make sure that our timing box is getting the timing retard signal. And the best thing about this setup here is you can see the red light right there on my timing box, and you'll also see a green light right next to it. Now whenever it receives the timing retard input signal, what's going to happen is you're going to see a green light flashing, and that signal is going to come on whenever the nitrous is active. So we can see right here, as soon as I go wide open throttle, you'll hear the relays clicking, and you'll start seeing the little green light flashing fast. That means that our signal is going through and everything is working properly, which means that we wired everything correct. So this is wired correctly. Now we can go in here and actually change the RPMs settings and do all that. And one last test that I'm gonna do, we'll do once I turn the car on, and that'll be testing to make sure that it only sprays between a certain the window of the RPM that it's going to. So the way that you do that is panel 1, and for the trigger timing, we're gonna set this to 1200 or 1300. So we want it to activate only when it gets to 1300, and then we want it to stop when it gets to, we'll do 1800. So once it reaches over 1800 RPM, then it should stop. We can keep going through here. We don't want to make any changes to any of this. Now, so that we don't have to go wide open throttle while the car is in park, we are going to go back here and change the throttle position threshold from 2.2 to just slightly over, like 0.7, which will basically activate the car as soon as we start trying to rev the car up. And then we don't have to completely slam the gas all the way. We can just slowly raise the revs and still be in the active position. So we'll finish that up, and then we'll turn the car on, and I'll show you guys how the car's timing signal only gets sent to the time box when we are within the range, and you'll also hear the relays only clicking when we're in that range. Okay, so I let the throttle basically be at its idle position. So as you guys can see, it says that it is triggered, that the throttle position that it's reading, the voltage is reading from my throttle pedal, is ready. But the solenoids aren't clicking, and we're not getting a timing retard built in because, again, we changed the RPM start and end. So let's go ahead and turn the car on, and I'm going to show you guys how this RPM readout looks like, and then show you guys the car actually working based on the RPMs it sees here. So let's go ahead and turn the car on. So the car is on, and you guys can see here we're at right about 1000 RPM, and it matches exactly what our aero force is reading, pretty down to the T. So it's pretty much identical on both fronts, and you see we're still active, but we don't have any output and the relays aren't clicking. Now it's gonna be kind of hard to hear the relays click, but based on our previous test when the car was off, we know that the output on the timing box of the Lingenfelter, when it's green and flashing, the relays are also working. So Let's go ahead and show you guys what happens. As you guys can see, it follows the RPMs very, very well. So let's go ahead and we're gonna go up to our 1300. And we see we're not there yet. And there you go. So relays are clicking and we're within range. As soon as we let go, they don't click anymore. Perfect, that's what we want. Now, let's see if it'll stop on the high end, on the upper end of the RPM range, which was 1800. There you go. No more timing pulled. So we're good to go. And that is how you test all your parameters, guys. Basically, we know this car is ready to go. So guys, that is set. Now that we've tested to make sure that the window part of the RPM works, we can go back here and finally put the final parameters, which are, of course, are when you want to spray, when you want to stop, and make sure you have the proper wide open throttle voltage as the triggers. All right, guys, so now we've got the controller program tested, the relays both tested, which is perfect. Everything worked the way that it should. Now we need to test the purge solenoid and make sure that that is working. So when we press this button, we've got the power. It should click on the purge solenoid. So if we press it, there you go. So you guys can hear it whenever I'm pressing the button. Perfect. So that works. That is awesome. Now, I've showed it in the last video, but I'm going to go ahead and show it now again. We're going to go ahead and plug in our fuel pump and test to make sure that the fuel pump works when we flip the arm switch. And we'll also show you guys how the two-step works and how that is tested. So we've plugged back in our power and our ground here, our plug. All right, guys, so we've got power. Now, as soon as I arm the switch, we should start hearing the pump in the trunk. There you go. So basically, every time I hit the arm switch, the pump will start working. And what that's going to do is start building up the pressure in our fuel system and make sure that our pressure builds up so that whenever we do start getting ready to spray the nitrous, the fuel pressure is above the set point that our fuel pressure safety switch is designed at or set to, and we've got the proper ground to our solenoids and it'll be able to spray. So that's another thing checked, that everything went right. Now the final thing I want to show you guys is the two-step and just how to see if you've got it working or not. And it's very, very simple. Again, using the timing box there, you can see it's got the power. And one way to see if it is active, if the two-step RPM limiter is active, is just flip the switch here and you'll see that it's blinking slower than it was with the timing, but it's still blinking. Basically, it is got an RPM limiter active. As soon as I turn this switch off, the light turns off up there. Turn it back on and it's good to go. So now whatever we have the RPM limit set over there, as long as you're flooring it, this thing is not going to let it get over that RPM set. And of course, the good thing about it is it's not wired together with the arm switch or the nitrous setup. So when you're flooring it, it's not gonna start spraying nitrous or pulling timing or doing anything like that. It'll actually just be the RPM limiter, and the nitrous system is completely independent of it, and which is how you want to have that, because you do not want this thing spraying nitrous when you're flooring it at an RPM limit. I think that is probably a really, really bad idea. Anyways, guys, that is it. We have gone through and tested everything and ensured that all our inputs, all our outputs are all properly working and designed and wired correctly, which is awesome, because that was a lot of wires and I did not want to have to go back and troubleshoot and find out what wires were not made up correctly or going to the wrong spots. So very, very thankful. Really, really cool. I'm excited about this build now that it's almost done. Again, like I mentioned, I do have to go back and heat wrap all these in the loom so that it looks nicer. And then we still have to get our race fuel and some fuel in to adjust and set our fuel pressure regulator, but we'll do that later in another episode. For now, I'm glad all the wiring is working, the relays are working. I'm gonna go ahead and tuck everything in, and then hopefully go find some nitrous, get some race fuel, and bring you guys a video very soon of the car spraying its nitrous shot. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this video was helpful in people trying to figure out how you can test your car and make sure that your car has got the wiring properly. Make sure your inputs are all being tested without having to be on the road or with the car on. Makes it very, very easy for you to audibly hear what's going on. So everything is now correct, and now it's just a matter of getting a few things cleaned up and having fun with the car, guys. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys have a great one. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.